Captain America 4 or Captain America Brave New World is a movie I was actually going to review the other day. I ended up putting up a video about Batman Beyond, so if you haven't seen that, check it out. We'll have some other stuff I want to talk about in this video throughout. But in general with this movie, I think that it is one that ever since it was conceptualized, there's been a bit of like I don't want to say hate campaign against it, but skepticism around it. Like, okay, well, you're handing this off. It's not Chris Evans anymore playing Steve Rogers. Now, obviously, it's Anthony Mackie playing Sam Wilson. You had all of the stuff around William Hurt sadly passing away, and then you had Harrison Ford stepping in to play that role. So you've got some tumultuous stuff behind the scenes, and then you've also got all these reports of reshoots throughout the year, like the last year. So we're going to talk about this with some spoiler-free stuff first off, and that's going to be some vague comments. We're going to talk about the tone. We're going to talk about some of my thoughts on the movie in general and expectations I would say you should go into it with if you're watching this before watching the movie. I know some people, they actually like doing that to see what other people think in general. And then we will get into spoilers. So we'll talk about that. Now, one thing I want to say is in spoiler free, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the stuff in the trailers too, okay? Now, when I say that, I don't mean like this character appears in the trailer, here's where they die, or here's where they do this fight, or here's where they do this. What I mean is like, you've seen the trailer, you know some generalities. So, with that said, this movie to me is one that I think has been really, really put under a microscope. It's been overly critiqued by a lot of people, but regardless of that, and regardless of going into this with a bias myself of not even really caring that much for Anthony Mackie as a person, like in terms of seeing all the stuff around him, with like putting his hand up to like child fans and be like, go away, like that kind of thing, like, no, stop, like out in public, where it's like every other MCU star would be at the very least kind of friendly, and he's just like, as soon as the cameras are not rolling or he's not at a convention, he's kind of like, leave me alone. It's like, I feel like I went into this with weird mixed expectations. Like on the one hand, I'm looking at the marketing, the movie looks like it's a lot about the Red Hulk, right? It's about basically Sam Wilson, and the Red Hulk is in the movie. I mean, he's in every single trailer basically. And then you have the stuff around Anthony Mackie, where unfortunately he not only hasn't built a great reputation for himself in certain parts of the fandom, but then also he's contending with the fact that he's not Chris Evans. So you have like a political aspect to that too, where like we've had years building up of bad stories in various universes, where, I mean, honestly, what sucks is people go into something now looking for it to be like woke or whatever, right? Like they're like, oh, a black Captain America. That didn't really have anything to do with this movie, believe it or not. Like there was nothing woke in this movie. And I want to get that out of the way because I feel like that's one of the main excuses people are using to dismiss the movie right off the bat. Like I went into this not really liking a lot of Anthony Mackie's behavior, liking his acting, being confused on the marketing, seeing all of these different reshoots, and at the same time being like, okay, well, I was one of the people who really liked this show, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I love this show. I thought it was great. Barring the very final speech with like the do better senator thing, I thought overall the show was great. And I thought that Wyatt Russell actually as John Walker in this was incredible. So in a way, I'm going into this like I'm expecting it has to acknowledge this, right? It has to acknowledge this show in a way. It also has to work for people who didn't want to watch this show or who didn't get Disney Plus. So it's got to do both. And then we've got all these characters from Hulk lore in this. So you can already tell that it's a little bit of a mixed bag for me, like just going in. Now that said, I think that Anthony Mackie did a very good job. And I like to pride myself on being someone who can have opinions on things, but still separate that to notice talent. I feel like going into this movie, I was a little conflicted on what to think. Is this going to be something is it going to be able to do what the comics did with Sam Wilson? Is it going to be able to preserve the spirit of Captain America, of that shield? And I think it does do that. That said, I think that with all of the elements for plot, where you're trying to jam characters in from different things, you're trying to deal with a recasting, you're trying to deal with people who didn't watch The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, You're trying to deal with the people who did. You're trying to deal with dangling plot threads from the past, by the way. Like, I'm not kidding. Without spoilers, you have no idea how many references there are to this movie, to The Incredible Hulk, from all the way back. So, like, if you don't like this movie, you never liked this movie, or you just never watched it, I feel like a lot of things are not going to land for you. And I never expected to say that going into a Captain America movie. It's like, what's the homework? Oh, did you watch The Falcon and the Winter Soldier? No? Oh, you'll be fine. Did you watch The Incredible Hulk? No? No, you're not going to like it that much. That's genuinely kind of how I felt. Like, it felt like they were just jamming a lot of stuff in from different films to wrap up and set up for future films. And it kind of sucks because I overall like the movie. Like, I have my thoughts on certain things around it. I do think it was overstuffed. I do think that the marketing was kind of a lie. Like, the amount that they market certain characters in the marketing. Like, if you're going in expecting, despite how much I talk about wrapping up stuff from previous movies, I will say one thing about character inclusion runtime of a character. Like, if you're expecting much of some of the characters in the trailers, you're not going to get them. Like, they drag out multiple sections from like 1 or 2 scenes in the trailer around conflicts to act like that's a crux of the movie, and it's not actually. It gave expectations people didn't know what to think. I think that a decade worth of kind of preachy stories from all kinds of universes have unfortunately set Anthony Mackie up almost to fail, which is not fair to him at all. I just feel like there's so many groups of people going into this movie looking to dislike stuff, and it kind of frustrated me because I feel like it's something that's overshadowed the valid criticisms of this film, which are things like it being overstuffed, the runtime actually not being enough, especially for the third act. They spend a lot of time building to the third act and then they don't fully go where you think they'd go. Like, a conflict builds, there's a initial fight with that conflict, and then you think, oh, well, there's going to be a regrouping and another fight. There's not. It ends there. I think that the movie has elements that are good. Like, it does some of the good things from previous films. It really did try to wrap up plot threads, which I think I commend them for doing that for a universe, but it didn't benefit the movie. Like, the film it was in did not benefit from that. And that's where I'm kind of left with this being a mixed bag for me, where I'm frustrated about it because I feel like it could have been really good, and I feel like instead it was just a fun movie. It's not amazing. I really don't think it's amazing. I don't give scores to things, but for me, this was probably my least favorite Captain America. And it's not because he's black, because I know someone always goes there. They're like, it's because he's black. No, it's just because it was like the writing quality was not as good as previous movies. It reminded me of the writing quality of maybe like Iron Man 2 or like Thor 2, where you watch them and you say, this was an enjoyable movie, I liked it. And back then people weren't crucifying the movies. Like, it could just be a fun movie and that was it. That's kind of what this reminds me of. Where, like, when you look at peak MCU, this is not that. Now, before we move into spoilers, I do want to be clear that I did enjoy this movie, and I do think that some of the things that it could be criticized for are just things that the modern MCU gets criticized for, things like cinematography. I feel like it would just make the review a lot longer. So one thing I've done is I've kind of taken this review and I've done a longer version of it for channel members and Patreon, just because I thought that normal viewers probably wouldn't watch that long. So if you're interested, that is over there. And we recently started something new as a way to try and kind of grow this channel, which is the Amazon affiliate program. So we actually have a Amazon affiliate link where if you buy something through this, we actually do make commission off of that. So if you're ever interested in any superhero stuff, things like that, we've been making some fun lists over there. The link will be in the description and pinned comment if you want to check some of that stuff out. I think it's pretty cool. And you know what? A lot of times it's just stuff people want to buy anyway. So I figure, hey, you get something you want, helps out the channel. It's kind of a win-win because YouTube is not kind to this channel, just in general. But that said, we're going to hop into spoilers. So whether you want to see the entire thing on members, that'll be a little longer, things like that, or you want to support the channel in one of the ways in the description or pinned comment, I appreciate you. And I just gave you a lot of time to run away if you don't want to see spoilers, which we're going to start now. So I want to say this. I was so invested in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier as a show, and probably more invested than a lot of people watching this. Maybe you were more than me. But I remember a lot of times I would do reviews every week that an episode would drop, or every couple weeks, covering a couple episodes. It's probably the only MCU show I ever did that for, because I was that into it. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the political intrigue. I enjoyed this stuff with like what's going to happen with the Shield, where is this going, kind of the down-to-earth terrorism plot. And I felt like they tried to do that here, but it doesn't really feel like it leads too much of anywhere. It's all very generic. Now, when I say that, I don't mean that I need everything to be really specific. Like, I don't need a message like we saw during 2019 through 2022, where everything was about like a pandemic or the Orange Man or this or that. Like, I don't need that hammered home. But what I mean is, like, when it comes to Captain America, one of the reasons I think The Falcon and the Winter Soldier worked for me, one of the reasons I think that Captain America, the Winter Soldier, the movie, Cap 2 worked, and one of the reasons I think Civil War worked is because they were multi-layered stories. I didn't feel like this was that. So in the first couple acts, this is building this entire conspiracy around Isaiah and Sam, and it's building this conspiracy around Ross, and you're like, okay, well, is Ross a bad guy? Like, and I don't mean an antagonist. I would argue Ross never viewed himself as a bad guy. Ross always thought he was doing the right thing, pretty much throughout the whole thing. So you're kind of looking at this and you're like, well, is he evil? Like, what's going on here? Because it seems like he's trying to get his life together, things like that. That's where I think Harrison Ford did a very good job with this character. He very much was able to humanize Ross, but I also feel like that's not fair to William Hurt, in the sense that Hurt didn't get enough screen time to do that. Like, he would always just appear in a movie for a couple minutes. Frustrating to talk about Harrison Ford in the role, because for years I was waiting to see William Hurt play Red Hulk. Genuinely. Like, back when they introduced Ross, I was like, dude, this is Thaddeus Ross. They're going to go that route. They waited so long to go that route that they had to wrap it up in a Captain America movie. And that would be probably my biggest criticism of this movie, is even though it's doing so much to try and wrap up and go back to things from this that were forgotten, which is weird to do in a Captain America movie, by the way. Like, what's the connection other than they're in the same world? Even though it's doing so much to wrap this up, the Red Hulk is barely in this movie. I mean, for screen time, he is Red Hulk for, I would be surprised if it's 10 minutes. Genuinely. There is a scene where he becomes Red Hulk finally at a speech, and then he is Red Hulk. There's a minor fight there. It transitions to a couple blocks away to a fight that continues, and then it's done. No more Red Hulk. So all of the trailers for this movie built up Red Hulk. They all built up like, you know, you got Ross here. He's going to become the Red Hulk. You're going to have this whole thing with Sam. Sam Wilson, he doesn't have the super soldier serum. How is he going to deal with a Hulk? Like, how is he going to do that? This is mind-boggling. And he has to deal with the Hulk for like 3 to 5 minutes. And I don't understand that. Like, I don't understand why this movie is 2 hours long. This movie, to me, and Jill's probably rolling her eyes. She's like on the other side of the room listening to me. Because I know I liked it more than her. So for some people, this movie being longer, I don't know if they'd like that. They might be like, oh, great. But for me, this movie was 2 hours long. And while I'm not made of time, if you're going to tell a comprehensive story with political layers to it, a conspiracy, trying to pass on the mantle of this shield of Captain America, which some people already don't believe in, by the way. Some people think like, hey, there was that one Cap, no one else should be it. Hey, there was that one Spider-Man, Miles Morales, no way. Like, they're very adamant on this, even though comics have been doing this forever. You had multiple Thors, you know, you had multiple different types of Hulks, you had multiple Captain Americas. John Walker was a thing forever, you know, you had Cap becoming Nomad, all this stuff, right? Even though you had this stuff, you have to prove that that works to an audience that might not have read comic books. And you're going to do that here in a soft, Incredible Hulk sequel with Captain America's name on it, but the Captain America isn't Steve Rogers. So now you've got all these people going into the movie, like they're skeptical of it because they're saying, oh, it's definitely going to be woke. It's going to be woke crap because there's a black guy. And every time they do that, it's garbage. Like they don't do good writing. So you've already got that skepticism. And then, by the way, the writing suffered. So it's like, that's not a great look. Then you have the skepticism around like seeing Red Hulk in the trailer, like I said in the spoiler-free section. And then you have the skepticism around how are they going to do a political plot? You know, like how are they going to do this? And all of those things kind of come together into this movie that feels like it's got elements of really good writing mixed in with like just the most mid writing ever. So there's moments in this movie that stand out. Especially, I thought the fight against Red Hulk near the end stood out. I thought that the discussion between Sam and Ross stood out, where it's kind of like him saying, hey, like if you're really trying to change, this is the moment you can show that. Things like that. I thought those were very good. But then it's having to contend with all these issues. Some of them are unfair, and I understand that. And you're going to bring to that like a B- writing quality? Why? Like, dealing with this stuff is where you should bring your A++ game. And with that runtime, the thing I was going to say is there's this trend in Hollywood I've been noticing. And it goes way back. I've even seen it with anime movies that Jill and I have talked about over on her other channel, Magical Jill, if you're interested in that. And it's to lower the runtime, not just for budget, but so that you can squeeze out like an extra 2 showings a day in each theater. So essentially the idea is if your movie's 3 hours long, there's going to be that many fewer hours in the day to show the movie over and over and over again, right? And what it feels like to me with this movie is it suffers from that. When Sam eventually fights Red Hulk, I was actually pretty much fine with everything up to that point. Now, when I say fine, I don't mean I loved it. I mean, there were parts I really liked, and there were a lot of parts I thought were undercooked, but I thought it was good enough. But then what ends up happening is basically the movie just ends. It just stops. You had all these reports of reshoots, then you had the director basically say that wasn't true. I don't really believe that. I don't really believe that wasn't true. You had scenes shown in the trailer like a funeral, which I believe was for Ross, something we could talk about in Rejected Media, actually, from some stuff I've found from different reports, things like that, that things that have been changed in the script over time and reshot and things like that. It seems that the original idea was essentially to go different directions with a lot of things. Even if you look at the leader, he got redesigned, like his concept art, his Funko Pop toy, a lot of this stuff was different than it was in the final movie. So when you add all these things together, to me, that says this is a movie that had kind of a troubled production. Oh, which, by the way, they don't even call Stearns the leader in that movie, at least that I remember. So that must have changed at some point too. There was rumors of like the Serpent Society being in here. That got removed, but Sidewinder was in here. Weird use of Giancarlo, by the way. He was in here, you know, being Sidewinder, and he's not in the movie very much. You'd think he'd be like a main villain with how good he is, especially in something like, what was it, Breaking Bad, and I believe he was in Better Call Saul. Great actor, but he's not really in the movie much. There's like multiple things here where I was like, whoa, this is gonna be cool, and then it's not in the movie much. Red Hulk wasn't the only one. Even then, later on, they have Bucky come in for a scene. And I remember I looked over at Jill and I was like, oh, maybe Bucky is gonna help. You know, because it's like they're gonna be... Because like the whole point of this, by the way, and one of the reasons why, if you look at this, it's both of them on the cover, right? For the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And then you have the back, and it's still both of them, right? Is because Bucky doesn't feel worthy to be Cap either. The shield was not given to him. It was given to Sam. Sam does not feel worthy to be Cap either. Bucky still feels that he should honor his friend's legacy by helping his friend's friend. And then these two become friends through that, right? That's a pretty big theme of the show. And so when Bucky shows up, I feel like they had this idea of like, well, we have to include Bucky. Why the hell wouldn't he show up? But then they don't do anything with him. He just leaves because they felt like if we do something with him here, then it's going to undermine Sam, because then he'll have a super soldier helping him. And we got to show that Sam can do it by himself. But the point of the show was he didn't have to. That was the point. That he didn't have to do it by himself. That he could have a friend. That he didn't have to be Captain America alone. Like, he could hold the shield, he could be the mantle, whatever, have the mantle. But it could be a team effort to carry on the legacy of Captain America. In the same way that it was for John Walker. Like, yeah, John Walker sucked at it, but he was put in an impossible situation He was not trained for what he was supposed to do. Then he did what he was trained to do as a soldier, and then he was punished for it. So, you know, in that show, I felt like it did such a good job diving into why this is such a complicated thing, and why Captain America wasn't an idea and a symbol, but also a person that no one can actually measure up to. Nobody can be Steve Rogers, and John Walker, even though he said he didn't want to be, he really tried to step into that role. Sam is stepping into that role, still feeling like he doesn't deserve it in this movie, but trying to just uphold the heart of what it means, instead of being Steve. So, why do we have to have this idea that he has to do it by himself? Like, the reason that Steve could do things by himself was because of the serum, right? I mean, he had the heart, but that extra strength made it so that he could stand alone if he had to, but he still always chose to stand with others if he could, serum or no serum. So then in this movie, it feels to me like you're going back on that idea and saying, now hold on, Sam's got something to prove. He's got to be able to handle the Red Hulk threat alone. I feel like if you had just had Sam fight Red Hulk and then he got beaten, essentially, like he could, you know, hold him off, but then he couldn't win. And then you had the scene with Bucky and Sam was visiting, you know, Joaquin in the hospital, and he was talking to him, and then Bucky said the thing, and then Bucky said, you know, like, you don't have to do it by yourself, this can be a team thing, and then they together fought the Hulk. I don't think that diminishes Sam's character. I don't think it does anything except make sense. And something that makes even less sense in this movie because of that is you already have to put on hold. It's something Jill always asks every time we watch one of these movies. She's like, where's Doctor Strange? Or like, where's Spider-Man? Or where's, you know, like, obviously Iron Man's dead during this, but even the earlier ones, they'd be like, why didn't Iron Man help during the Winter Soldier stuff? You know what I mean? It's like you always have to kind of like put that aside, right? Because it's a story about them. Well, then why did you have him show up? Like, you have him show up and he could help, and he's like, sorry, I gotta go. And on top of that, people who didn't show up, anybody from the Hulk lore that you would think would show up. Bruce Banner, no. Mentioned like 30 times, not in here. She-Hulk, no. It's like, where is everybody around this conflict? Where is everybody except for Ross and Stearns? Nowhere. It's just on Sam to deal with this all alone. Basically, they might as well have called this The Incredible Hulk 2, or Captain America v Red Hulk, Dawn of 5-Minute Fight. Why not? What? I didn't think it was that funny.
You should mention the terrible end credit scene.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, that was really bad. There was a really bad end credit scene where basically the leader was like to Sam, you think this is the only world out there? There's a multiverse. And Sam didn't need that. We as the audience didn't need that. We know. We know. People are sick of it, by the way. I am like the only person who still likes the multiverse. I don't know about you, Jill. Do you still like it?
Oh, I love Multiverse. I think it's awesome.
I think it's cool. Like,
I loved Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. I think I'm the only person who went to that movie and came out saying that was amazing.
I liked Thor: Love and Thunder.
I loved that movie too.
I mean, like, so
I
we're...
have bad taste, I guess.
No, my point is, I feel like we are not super picky. You know what I mean? I just don't understand why some of the decisions that were made around this movie were. And overall, I like it. Like, I like the movie. I like the high-flying aerial combat scenes. I like the stuff around Sam still trying to uphold this. Would I buy this movie? Actually, probably. I think that this is more interesting to me than Shang-Chi. Like, I thought this movie was a lot more interesting than Shang-Chi. I thought this movie was a lot more interesting than the Marvels. I thought this movie was a lot more interesting than the Eternals, which, by the way, I forgot to mention, the entire plot of this movie is setting up the existence of adamantium and also dealing with the Eternals' celestial body.
Yeah.
The celestial corpse.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention that. So that's another movie this is dealing with.
Yeah, so you kind of have to either A, know that the celestial thing happened in Eternals, or B, watch the movie, I guess.
Yeah.
But I didn't watch it, so I didn't even know.
Yeah, well.
And then they mention adamantium like once, and you think it's gonna be like a big deal in the movie, and then they don't really mention it again.
No, it just comes up of like, that's why this treaty needs to matter, because adamantium.
It feels like they were trying to set up a future X-Men movie in this universe by doing that, but then they didn't. Like,
the whole thing also leaves me kind of like confused on the universe. Like, so is there not going to be a Wolverine from this Earth who has adamantium in him? Because where would that have come from before that? It wasn't even discovered before this. The government didn't even know it existed. But then in She-Hulk, there is a reference to a possible Wolverine of like a guy who had been clawed by someone with metal claws, essentially, in the show. It's like a throwaway line, like about something that happened in the world during that year.
Maybe that was the Wolverine that got put into the MCU by
it was before it.
Stuff.
It was before it.
Yeah, but we don't know what the timeline is on that. That could have happened beforehand in the She-Hulk timeline.
I mean, I guess it's possible. I don't really know. I just think that, in general, there's been like a lot of messiness to these films recently.
Yeah.
And I don't really understand why it's so hard for them, because you have access to TV shows, you have access to your films. You know, there's a lot you can do here, and you were doing it for years. I feel like I came off like I don't like the movie. I actually do like the movie. I think my problem is I don't love the movie. You know, like I didn't think it was great. If I was to measure the plot of any other Captain America movie against this, I think this is the least interesting, and I think that it is the most disappointing. And I think especially that thing with Red Hulk just really frustrated me. And it's funny because it's like the one thing I went in thinking I'd have a problem with was Anthony Mackie, because all I hear is all these stories about him being a rude dick to people. And then I go in and it's like he was the best part of the film. You know what I mean? So I don't feel like I was biased against the movie. Like, I don't feel like I went in and I'm like, yeah, Sam's not really Cap. Come on, they put a black guy in there. Yeah, right. Woke. Like, I didn't feel like that at all. Like, the one thing that, and not even from that angle that I care, by the way, but the one thing I thought I was going to be critical of was him, because I didn't think I was going to be able to separate all these stories I've heard from his acting as Sam, and I thought it was just going to kind of tarnish it for me. And yet, like, him and Harrison Ford were the absolute best parts of the movie. It's just that the writing around them was not good. And even when Isaiah was included in the storyline, I liked Isaiah. I thought, oh, maybe we're going to do something with him. Maybe we'll even get a flashback to like back when he was the forgotten Cap. No, we didn't get anything with him. He just sat in prison. I don't know. I wanted to like this movie way more than I did, and instead I just like it. I'm not trying to be overly critical of it or anything like that. I don't understand the people who hated it. I thought that was kind of weird. Like, there's way worse MCU movies than this. Way more grating MCU movies, way more preachy MCU movies, way more poorly written MCU movies, but this is so middle of the pack, not special, that I think that really hurts it. And I guess in closing, there were talks to do a second season of the show. There were talks to do The Falcon and the Winter Soldier season 2, but call it Captain America and the Winter Soldier, and do a season 2 essentially follow-up. And if they had just done this storyline in that with like Red Hulk, maybe had him in a couple episodes, maybe done some stuff with Ross, things like that, I think it would have been way better. Now, could they have afforded Harrison Ford? Probably not. So, you know, that's probably one of the big problems. But in general, to condense this down to not only one movie that's trying to wrap up all this stuff, but also to condense it down to a 2-hour movie that's trying to wrap up all this stuff, I feel like it was just a big mistake. So these are some of my thoughts on the movie. I'm interested to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. A couple things before we close it out. I already did mention the Amazon affiliate link. That kind of stuff helps out our channel a lot. We have a Fortnite code, which is DJAY123. Lots of Marvel characters in there. Using that helps out our channel as well. Patreon, channel memberships. We also have a Discord, which will be in the description. And finally, we do have a store, CosmoBunny.shop, where we make coasters, keychains, trays, and more out of recycled paper from damaged comics, manga, magazines, and more. Basically books that have been rejected, like rejected media, actually, in a lot of ways. And we believe in media preservation and turning something that doesn't have life anymore into something new with new life. So that's something we do over there. A discount code DJAY123 will get you 10% off your first purchase of those coasters, keychains, trays, and more. A lot of hard work goes into them. Recently had a purchase from someone which we really do appreciate because it's kind of a tough time of year for the channel. So thank you very much for supporting us. Have a fantastic day. And as always, everyone, stay shway.